Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much again for joining us today. My name is Nick Zarowski, and I'm a Senior Manager for Policy and Advocacy with the Alliance for Peacebuilding. And I am so excited to host the third event today as part of the SDG16 Storytelling Initiative. This is a joint effort by the Alliance for Peacebuilding, the civil society platform for peacebuilding and state building, Forus International, and the Transparency, Accountability, and Participation Network. And this initiative seeks to strengthen local civil society's capacity for storytelling as a tool to advance peace building, justice, and the implementation of SDG 16 plus. So we're so excited for a dynamic, in-depth, and rich discussion today on storytelling in restricted environments. We're going to hear from a range of colleagues working in different contexts and regions to share practical and concrete recommendations. And we're also going to highlight the resilience and innovation of civil society actors. Before we hear from our esteemed speakers today, I want to paint a picture of global civic space and the increasingly restricted environment that civil society is working on when it comes to SDG 16. According to the most recent Civicus Monitor, which tracks the state of freedom of association, peaceful assembly, and expression in 198 countries and territories, 30% of the world's population lives in closed civic space. 42.4% live in repressed civic space. 12.9% live in obstructed civic space. 11.1% live in narrowed civic space, and only 3.6% live in open civic space. I want everyone to stop and really think about what I'm saying here. Only 3.6% of the entire world's population lives in open civic space right now. The index cites broad global trends behind these numbers, including a crisis of multilateralism and international norms, the capture of institutions by oligarchs, and a toxic mix of populism and authoritarianism. A few weeks ago, AFP co-hosted a session at the Peace Connect convening in Nairobi, which was a 5-day gathering for local peace builders and their allies to promote connection, creativity, and collective action. Our session explored how peace builders can successfully navigate working in highly restricted civic spaces, and the conversation surfaced concrete recommendations and best practices that are bright spots of hope amidst these concerning trends. First, we need to recognize that civil society is critical to building a healthy, functioning democratic system, and that civil society is under attack everywhere. This is not something that we can treat as a one and done issue. It's a fight that we're all in together, and civil society all around the world has been working on these issues and garnering best practices and lessons learned in the process. We had a speaker from Hungary talk about the critical need to not give an inch to attacks on civic space, especially at the community level. We have to address everything that is happening early and often, and we have to be on our toes and not on our heels. And we have to work preventatively to address emerging threats to civic space before they become more formidable. We also heard from a speaker in Zimbabwe who talked about the importance of using the law and building movements of lawyers to open civic space through legal channels. And we have to make sure that local peace builders and human rights defenders who are working to implement SDG 16 and telling the story of their work receive the support they need. And that includes support for their mental health, their well-being, and their legal protections. This work is too important to go without the support. Most importantly, we need to break away from seeing civic space as another project for grants and programs. Opening civic space is a constant, nonlinear, iterative effort that will require trying new things, pivoting away from what's not working, and being brave together. So with that, I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Elena Marmo. She's the head of advocacy and campaigns at the TAP Network, who's going to share a bit of information on the TAP Network's recent work on this nexus. Elena, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nick, and thanks everyone for being with us here today as colleagues and participants and kind of co-conspirators in the struggle for opening civic space around the world. And many of us are working in restrictive environments. I think maybe, my colleague Nick has offered so much that I'll just add a couple of things to kick us off. But as the TAP Network, we've been working closely with a handful of other organizations that work across these kind of civic space, justice issues, human rights issues, and we've been really looking at how can we as a broader civil society community, really map the challenges and the creative workarounds and solutions that civil society are enacting in the process. And so in many ways, we're finding that we can learn from one another, right? Colleagues in the United States can learn from colleagues in Nepal or Belarus. And so I think this event today is very much in the spirit of kind of some of these conversations we've been having in different settings. So we are sort of calling this initiative that we've been working on as sort of an existential threats kind of stream of work, where the objective is to, through very kind of targeted and specific thematic group discussions, move beyond just kind of diagnosing the challenges that we're facing to identify and map initiatives and efforts that are already being undertaken to address these challenges and exploring solidarity-driven solutions, things like potential campaigns or advocacy, targeted advocacy work that we can do to really support the expansion of civic space around the world, with a view to really mobilize collective action. So I'll just note that we are having another one of those conversations at the International Civil Society Week, which is hosted by Civicus. So Civicus is an organization that Nick had noted. They do really interesting work on monitoring civic space trends around the world, but they also host this annual or biannual, I think, every so often conference. So if anyone is attending the International Civil Society Week, I'll just drop some information about that event in the chat because I think it'll be kind of an interesting way for us to continue this conversation. So I'll really leave it there. I think Nick offered us a really robust and rich kind of framing for this discussion. And so to kind of give you an idea of how this flow will work today, we have four wonderful panelists with us today. So we will hear from each of our panelists, and each of us, a few of us who are part of this organizing initiative will present those questions to each of our panelists. And then we have two questions that will hopefully have time to kind of pitch over to all of the panelists. So we'll hear from each of them in their individual capacities, and then we'll kind of have a bit of a discussion amongst the panelists. And then we'll have some time to turn over to all of you for questions you might have. So do feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll kind of compile those as we go. And so I think that's all for now. I think at this point I'll hand it over to my colleague Elise Granley from Civil Society Platform for Peacebuilding and Statebuilding to introduce our first panelist. Over to you, Elise.
Thank you so much, Elena, and for the introduction. I have the pleasure of introducing our first panelist, which is Prabesh Raj Joshi from the Asian Academy for Peace Research and Development, based in Nepal. So pleasure to have you here with us today, Prabesh. And I first wanted to ask you a couple of questions. If you could elaborate first a little bit about how the situation is in Nepal, and how you have seen it also changing over the years. And also from your perspective, what are innovative approaches to navigate in a changing environment? So over to you, Parvesh.
Okay, thank you, Alice, for your nice introduction. So talking about the Nepal, the country had transited from the monarchy to the Federal Democratic Republic and adopted a new constitution in 2015. So with this structure, it's developed the power to the 7 provinces and the 753 local governments. And despite the new system, the political parties have the struggle to maintain the stable majority governments, leading to the frequent coalition collapse. And this has a very deep public frustration with the political class and frustration over the corruption. The nepotism and unemployment has boiled over, and the most recently insignificant, you may have aware about the youth death protest, and this movement has often organized via social media, so a powerful demand for the genuine accountability and change beyond the traditional political elite. Talking about all these things, we can see there is some needed of the storytelling and all these things is very important in the part of peace building world, because it's not about only the reports, it's not about only the some certain of the stories, but it is more about the empathy and the truth and the reconciliation. So under the financial pressure, we see a disturbing trend, like storytelling working is like becoming a short-term project, like a single event. So rather than making it a more impactful and continuous journey for the community. So now we can see a lot of challenges because of the fundraising, fund crisis, and a lot of things, and cut down on the funds. So it is giving many kind of the pressures to the people who are working in peace building and the storytelling, to bringing the story from the community level.
Thank you so much, Pravesh. I will now pass it over to my next colleague, Jyotsna, who will introduce the next speaker, who will continue also on the context of Nepal.
Thank you so much, Elise. My question is to Arjun Bhattarai from NGO Federation of Nepal. And Arjun, I just wanted to know for the audiences that the latest political turmoil in Nepal has highlighted both the challenges and the opportunities for the civic engagement in the restrictive environment. How has NFN, as a national civil society platform from Nepal, been engaging during this period? And what role do you see for such platforms in ensuring that civil society voices are heard in times of political turmoil? Arjun, over to you.
Well, okay, thank you, Rosna, and thank you this important discussion and dialogue. And of course, NFL is a national umbrella represents you. And after this Gen Z movement of September 8th and 9th, there are lots of new issue, and in the census context, we are struggling shaping our activism, and even the issue and agenda. And of course, as NFN, as a civil society, we have a great role to shaping our democracy, and shaping and protecting human rights, and of course the civic space. And after this Gen Z a movement, like we are discussing with a lot of with the whole political force, traditional political force, and of course the Gen Z leaders, and coordinating different stakeholders, including journalist federation, bar associations, and we are making one position, to support this transitions, and continuing to shaping this political transition, and of course we build our democracy somehow it's getting in trouble in a short time. So we want to protecting our constitutions, and we want to protect our democracy and democratic rights, civic space. So as a national umbrella, and not only the umbrella, as the Confederation of Different Civil Society Movement, and taking a lead role, we are doing like different multi-stakeholder dialogue and roundtable dialogue with the different forces. So it is the opportunity. And on the other hand, there's one big threat from the traditional force. It's like we call previous the king supporter. They are threatening to the civil society, including myself and NGO Federation, and we are somehow they are planning to we are kind of supporting to the Gen Z movement, and even like they are threatening to supporting the political force, supporting the resource and context. So this is one struggle to how we can safely engage in this process. And other hand, of course, we have to protect our democracy, human rights, and civic space. So as a civil society activist, we are in a very critical time and critical situation, but it is an important role that we have to play in this situation. So now our the final or like there's a election declare. So and so we are like monitoring this whole process of the government whether they are really preparing for the pre and fair election. So we are pushing to government to hold in a election in a in a this given time or within the 6 months. So this is the big time and opportunity, and also of course there's a big challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arjun. Okay, we'll ask the next round of questions. But meanwhile, may I request Elena to facilitate the next speaker?
Yes.
Elena, over to you.
Thanks so much, Diatsna, and thank you, Arjun, as well, for those insights from the Nepalese context. We'll move now to the Belarusian context. I'm pleased to introduce my colleague Irina Ponedelnik, who is an SDGs expert and scientific coordinator of the Belarusian Civil Society Report on SDGs implementation, both in 2022 and this recent HLPF 2025. So Irina, the first question I have for you is, in preparing the Belarusian Civil Society report on the SDGs, what were some of the main challenges and risks working in such a restrictive civic space environment, and how did you and your team navigate these challenges to ensure that this report remained independent and credible? So over to you, Irina.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ileana, for this question. I will say that the main challenge is, of course, shrinking civil space itself in Belarus, because, I mean, I hope that a lot of you knew this issue, that after the peaceful protests in 2020, civil landscape changed really dramatically for all of us. And for now, more than 2,000 NGOs were liquidated and lost their registration. Of course, unfortunately, we cannot have any public participation or dialogue with authorities, even regarding such a nice topic as SDGs, because previously they were quite open for all of us. But at the same time, for us, it's also opportunity to still to be engaged in these SDG reports, and opportunity to work with shadow reports or alternative reports give us some hope. Also, I would say that one of the serious challenge for us is, if we talk about SDGs, it's limitation of data, because we cannot believe for Belstat, it's Belarusian Statistical Committee. At the same time, Belarusian government quite intensive and saying all the time that they are quite good in all statistical indicators, how they collect data, etc. But in reality, what we see and how we communicate this topic with experts, we cannot believe it. And of course, it's should give us some thoughts how to find the alternative sources. And this is also quite a big issue for us, because Belarusian civil society right now, and even it was the same with preparation of this report, we also face some financial issues, because I mean, they're limited, of course, for us. And the procedure, how preparation of Belarusian civil society report on SDGs in 2022, totally different on how it was in 2025. And also, I will say that, of course, this webinar, it's about SDG16, and this is nice. Most focus of all our report in 2025 was about human rights issues. This is priority. This is the only, I mean, even if we talk about climate change or educational issues or culture, Belarusian culture, still we connect everything to human rights, because this is the main priority. This is also a kind of challenge, I will say, for us. I mean, I myself personally involved in climate change issues. Of course, I want to speak more about these things, but right now we need and we focus only on human rights things. And of course, if we talk about risk, it's the same. We still have some experts inside the country, and of course, I myself as coordinator cannot add them in our communication channel with everyone and etc. because it is risk for them. Again, if we talk about SDGs itself, not about, of course, human rights, that it's totally complicated topic for Belarusian government.
Thank you so much, Irina. And I think you've highlighted sort of twofold the role that data, quantitative data, but also the role that stories of civil society's experiences, like how both of those can play a role in countering misinformation and disinformation, but also the role that those have as inputs to official policy processes like the VNR process. Highly recommend reading the report that you all put out this past year. I'm sure I can link it in the chat, or Irina, if you have it handy. But yeah, I think you've also rightfully acknowledged the need for us to think about how maybe we as different communities sort of take our work outside of the very technocratic kind of language and SDG targets and indicators and goals and all of those sorts of things and distill it into a much more kind of easily accessible language, talking about human rights, right? They are very central to SDG 16. So how can we think about the way in which our narratives and the stories we tell can make some of our work maybe more accessible? So I will now pass it over to my colleague Nick to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Elena. Let me just spotlight our next speaker. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm so excited now to turn over to Darini Priscilla. Darini and I first crossed paths a few years ago when she gave a presentation to one of AAP's working groups, and I was so impressed and floored that I wanted to bring her back for this discussion. Just a bit about Darini. She's an independent consultant that's based in Sri Lanka that works at the intersection of gender and digital rights. Her expertise spans resource development, and she works as a trainer and facilitator leading capacity building initiatives and training of trainers to foster growth and empowerment. And in the area of gender, she specializes in gender mainstreaming, capacity building, addressing gender-based violence, and her work includes fostering digital peace building, promoting social cohesion online, and addressing technology-facilitated gender-based violence, or TFGBV. So I want to kind of open with the question, Darini, on kind of outlining the challenges, right? And if you could maybe kind of provide an overview of what are the challenges that women and girls and women-led peace-building organizations or human rights organizations face in these restricted environments, especially when it comes to telling and amplifying stories online in the middle of problems like TFGBV. So over to you.
Thank you, Nick. I think the first one is a very obvious one and something that we've all experienced at some point. When you try to talk about peace or justice, or if you're trying to talk about the conflict in your country or your context, especially if you're a woman or a gender minority, the more visible you are and the more vocal you are, the more vulnerable you become, right? Talking about this, whether it's a formal thing, an informal thing, it makes you a target of so many different types of TFGBV, or what we call tech-facilitated gender-based violence. You become a victim of harassment, of image abuse, of threats of sexual violence, of doxing, of character assassination. Just there's so much that can happen just because you spoke out about something. And this kind of incidents also leads to what we call the chilling effect or the silencing effect, where because you were harassed or because you were violated in this space, you feel the need to hold yourself back or to censor yourself from speaking up about it later, either online or offline. Another challenge I would say is that for a lot of women and also peace building organizations, civil society organizations working in restrictive environments, the digital literacy is often low, right? The digital literacy can be low. They can have very limited resources to understand and to implement cybersecurity, whether it's for their official accounts or whether it's for their personal profiles. They also, in these countries, in this context, have inadequate legal frameworks. They do not have the laws that always protect them from cyber crimes, especially cyber crimes that are targeted towards women. They also have very limited reporting options, right? It's either go to the police or report it to the platform. Otherwise, you don't have anywhere else to go. There is also, when we talk about storytelling and women peace builders, what I've noticed and what I've heard a lot when working with these communities is that there is an emerging narrative or an issue of having to cater to the online trends or being able to go viral, right? Because you notice that certain, if you follow certain trends or if you follow certain styles or certain platforms, you have a tendency to amplify your voice or what you're trying to say. So when I do workshops or work with these organizations, with these women in capacity building spaces, they always ask, how do I go viral? How do I get this message across to people? So that's also a challenge, that it's very hard to get your voice heard in these environments. And I would say finally, a biggest challenge and an ongoing challenge is that storytelling in general for anybody in a restrictive environment is very complicated because you are constantly under surveillance or censorship, right? So you always have to filter what you're doing through the narrative of how do I say this without making it worse? How do I say this without getting into more problems? How do I say this without harming myself or the communities that I'm trying to serve? So it's exhausting to think that through every time you're trying to work, but that it is the reality of a lot of peace builders, women peace builders out there.
Thank you so much, Sharini. Yeah, and um, really good summary of kind of the challenges. And I think your opening comments on how women and girls are the kind of chilling effect and the attacks they face online with the rise of AI technologies and deepfake technologies. Laura Bates, who's a wonderful feminist scholar, has a new book out on the new era of digital sexism and artificial intelligence. I've not read the book yet, so don't don't quiz me on it. But I heard there's a statistic in it that 99% of deepfakes on the internet are of women, just to show how prevalent these types of attacks are. So maybe you want to strike a more optimistic tone or more kind of what can we do tone, right? Which is asking, what are the interventions that you have seen in your work, Durini, that can be programs or policies that help support storytelling by women and women-led organizations in restrictive environments, especially in digital spaces when you're talking about women peace builders, human rights defenders, and the organizations that they lead?
Sure. I'll start with programs first because that's more close to a lot of the work that I do. Like I said, there's a huge kind of discrepancy between the violence that happens and the digital literacy. So an important one is to make sure that there is digital safety and resilience training for these women, for these organizations. They need to know. I've seen so many workshops about storytelling on peace building or within civil society, but those workshops don't include sessions or discussions about how do you be safe, because if you talk about this, you're going to be affected. So digital safety training is crucial. The second one is that there needs to be, and this might be a bit of a controversial one, but there needs to be a communications component that is compulsory, mandatory in all the programs that we do. Communications, or comms as we call it in this space, is always kind of an afterthought. There is no budget for it. There is no dedicated comms person. It's like one person who knows how to handle Canva. And even that, they don't have a pro account or whatever. So there has to be a budget line. It cannot be something that we allow people to handle by themselves, right? It has to be an intentional inclusion. And in terms of programs, another thing I would recommend, and that has worked, is that when we talk about storytelling in these environments, mentoring and peer networks really help. But more often than not, the mentoring always comes from the West, right? You go to like the US or you go to Europe and you learn from experts about how to tell stories from restrictive environments, whereas the actual mentoring has to be coming from people who are in those restrictive environments. people who you can relate to, people who have the same resources or even fewer resources like you do. In terms of policy, a lot of this is basic because in these restrictive environments, we are working with this kind of level, right? The first is to legally recognize that TFGBV is a form of violence, that it is illegal and it should be criminalized. In a lot of countries, including mine, there is no legislation against TFGBV specifically, right? The second policy should be platform accountability. Platforms like Meta, whether social media or not, they do intentionally amplify violence. They do intentionally amplify hate. So where is the framework, either locally or internationally, to regulate and to have accountability? That's another thing. And finally, I would say what you guys are doing right now is to make storytelling a part of policy frameworks. Storytelling is often seen as a reporting tool, where once you're done with a project or a program, you use a story or a video or a document to say what happened. But storytelling should be part of the program. It should be part of the implementation. So that in itself should be included in policies like SDG 16 to make sure that it's a tool that we use, not just a reporting mechanism.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tarini. So always great to hear your insights. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back down the line of our panelists and pose another round of questions for everybody. So I'm going to turn it back to the speaker who started it all, my colleague Elise from CSPPS, to pose another question to Pravesh. So Elise, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nick. And then I would like to invite Pravesh as well. Yes, perfect. It's highlighted. Yes, so you spoke a little bit then also about the situation, and I was wondering now if you could also dive a bit more into the innovative approaches as well that you elaborated on previously, and maybe also how the role of media has been also in your context. Sorry.
Thank you, Alice. Talking about the recent scenarios, all these things, and the digital innovations, and all about the things, the most important thing is how the message come out. Like, because there is the big role of the media person, yeah, what we hear, and how the trend goes on, because the people is so globalized and everyone is so in touch with the social media and the news and all these things. So what the information come out is very important thing. So at this time, the main role is always played by the social media. So during the blackout and unrest the time, the risk of the rumors and the state propaganda is very high. So credible, independent that the media has to be provide a verified and stable reference point for the public to understand what is truly happening. So journalists and all the media person who are working at the media has to act as essential witness by documenting the excessive forces that arrest and damage of the property during the protest, and they create objective permanent record that is crucial for the future accountability, because what has happened at the past time has it's very important to document all those things for the future accountability and the legal challenges against all kind of the human right violations. So we must integrate the digital tools for the wider reach while allowing the grounding the content in the and in the person as a and talking about the resources and all the security protocols and all these things. So the most important part, the media has to be aware about the information flow is not a disinformation. It's a clear information. It's a real information, and it is not a biased information by any kind of the political influence and other any kind of the influencer. So there is a pressure to the civil society and also pressure to the media also, but they have to be they need to partner and they need to invest between the two part to create a story to bring all the sensitive issues highlighting to the people, and the people can aware about what is going on and real happening in the past situation. So they need to learn from the situation, and they need to broadcast all the things so clearly to the people.
Thank you so much, Pravesh. I will pass it over to my colleague Jyotsna.
Thank you so much, Elise. And I will again invite Arjun for the next round of question. And Arjun, I wanted to ask from NFN experience, what strategies have proven effective in keeping civic space open and protecting the role of civil society in Nepal, especially when youth-led movements such as Gen Z are at the forefront of changes? Arjun, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Josna, for the important questions. And civil society of Nepal is always, united. So we want to keep united. Okay, we have differences, but one strategy we united, and continue communication each other, and we keep our differences like differently, but as a, like for the change movement or for the human rights, for the civic space, for democracy, we united, and like we created all kinds of common position uh, in this changing context, like for the for the democracy, for the peace building, for the human rights. So this is very important, like dialogue and discussion within the civil society, and also trust building. And because the civil society is very, very strong in Nepal, and also we continue dialogue with the security force, and government, interim government, the minister, and like also even the whole political force. So this is the one hand we ourselves make the strong alignment within the civil society. On the other hand, we keep continue dialogue with the different stakeholders. This is a very good strategy. The second, of course, is we effectively communicate with the media and social media or mainstream media, and we share our message to the public. Then at least public understand the Nepali civil society playing the very important roles. And in this context, also we even work together with the National Human Rights Commissions, because after the Gen Z movement, there's a lot of issue, but this violation, this trade, and even death, and there's a misuse of the weapons, so gun and others. So and then we request the National Human Rights Commission. They form one, the independent agency to monitor this whole situation, and we are the part of this monitoring team. So I think we need to bring all stakeholders together for the common purpose of for the civic space, for the democracy, and for the human rights. And I have to add together the questions of I got out question in the chat box, what the international support in this critical time. I think one of course there's many issue and agenda, but however there's other country also the similar some similar types of momentum in other countries like Bangladesh or Pakistan and others. So maybe we can make one international global sharing meeting. What the positive, what pros and cons of this Gen Z movement in a political scenario. I think we can do one collectively. The second, of course, now we are going to develop the white papers on position of the civil society to keep continuously space, and to see the futures, how we can keep continue our space. So it's very important, international experience, how Bangladeshi civil society work in Bangladesh, how Pakistani civil society work in Pakistan or Kenya and other countries. I think we need to get some concrete position paper. I think that is is very important for this time. And third, I think this time we don't need an international negotiator or international mediator, but of course knowledge and experience is very important. So I think we can get that knowledge and experience if some expert can that can depth knowledge in this situation, because it will be a continue different issue in futures with Gen Z or other political party. So this is the very important for us. And finally, I will conclude here, as a civil society activist, the protection of the civil society is very, very important. The civil society leaders or civil society organizers. So we need a concrete framework or international standard to protect the civil society leaders and civil society activists during the conflict time, during this very critical situation. Because even we are facing a lot of threat from different stakeholders. So this is the one challenging time for the civil society. So in this regard, I think this continued dialogue and discussion with the different stakeholders is very important. So this is in this critical time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arjun. It's very, you have, I think you're done with your answer,
Yeah,
Arjun.
so if any further questions, I don't if you have any further questions, maybe I can respond. Otherwise,
Yes, we'll have another round of questions. But thank you so much. As you say, that it's very important to basically protect the right of the civil society activists and those who are working, those who are speaking freely about the civil society issues. I think these are in this age of repression. You have raised a very valid point, and obviously we should take proof from what has happened in Nepal and in Bangladesh before. So thank you so much. And I will go to my colleague Elena for another round of question. Elena, over to you.
Thank you, Jayatana, and thanks again, Arjun. I think Darini highlighted the role that storytelling can play in policy contexts, and I think you've spoken to that a bit now. And turning over to my colleague Irina, I think the work for the Belarusian Civil Society report on the SDGs is also really doing that in an effective way. So my question for Irina is, how has producing this alternative civil society report contributed to accountability and broader conversations on SDG16 in Belarus or within the broader community? What role has storytelling kind of played in that report for you? And then with that, this is like a three-part question, so sorry. With that, are there some lessons or insights that you think might help other civil society actors that are working in similar contexts? So.
Yeah, thank you so much. A lot of questions, but I will try to answer all of them. So regarding accountability, I mean, of course, if we will see what Belarusian government wrote in Forus International report, it is everything about only good things, that they create new laws that doesn't work, or new other regulations that is created. I don't know, in this in VNR that Belarusian government did, everybody participated, but actually it doesn't work. I mean, we never saw any online opportunities for experts to participate, or any news how they actually develop this VNR. So our report, it's also solves this gap that we see. So we within this within 2025 civil society report on SDG implementation, we had a lot of chapters, and 4 of them were related to specifically SDG16, and we tried to really show to our partners worldwide what is going on and what's the gap actually. So this, it is also opportunity for them to understand what is the gap, because in VNR you will see that everything is good, but there is no words as a human rights itself. But in our report you can see it. Also, what this opportunity give us, I mean, all this alternative and shadowing things that is created under SDG framework, it is also for us opportunity to be visible. And this is also maybe interesting for our partners who also live and work on restrictive and shrinking civil space countries, and also especially for our region, Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia. This is something that we can we can share with our partners. I mean, for example, right now it's Georgia, who can do the same things as we do, and to even give some pressure for the government itself. Also, I mean, regarding storytelling things, I mean, I'm a self-communicator as a professional, so I always wanted to do more communication things. But of course, it was impossible within this year because we didn't have any financial things, and all this job and this report, it's only based on voluntary things that me and colleagues who believe in me and SDGs, I will say, mostly for SDGs, I think they spend their time to write these true stories. And what is also a kind of important to tell is the issue that we try to be as much as focused as possible. So, for example, if we have for example, SDG4, and we're supposed to write about quality of education, I propose to experts to focus on violations, specifically violations. So, for example, in our cases, we had a chapter about how teachers lost their jobs because they participated in protests, or they still interested in climate change, SDGs, etc. And this is also a case regarding SDG16. So we divided this chapter for, as I told, for 4 parts: climate justice, more or less. Culture rights. This is also important topic for us, for Belarusians who struggle to use their language. Of course, SDG 16 itself, and it really also give opportunity for journalists. And as I wanted communicators to just open this report, we didn't print out anything, but I still use it as a book. Open chapter and say story, but in the end, of course, we had limited resources, and unfortunately this wasn't communicated that well. But I see this shadow and alternative reports, if it's focused not on general things but more about storytelling, and storytelling should be as a main core part that you can see if you will check our report. This is really important, and this is something that we need to use. And I mean, thank you for Tape that you actually is talking about these storytelling things and for this quite complicated goal 16. But this is something for us to develop. And I think, yeah, just one thing to say, what can be also a kind of a role model for everybody else. If you become to be in exile, this is our case. So a lot of experts, as I told, 2,000 NGOs were completely liquidated, and it means that a lot of experts and civil society representatives, they moved to another countries around the world. Even Argentina, I don't know, Africa, a lot of countries in EU, and this kind of reports can also be connection for you, for develop your network, to still be in touch with each other. And it also give, even I will say, for us a step for resilience, even if you're in exile.
Thank you so much, Irina. I think really speaking to the value of both the process of creating the report, but also the report itself as an outcome for civil society colleagues, and some really great best practices as far as how to do this in a coordinated and collective way. And I think you're speaking to also the impact that many of these funding challenges have had on communications work in particular, as Darini also highlighted before. So I'll pass it over to Nick now to hear from Darini one more time.
Thank you so much, Elena and Irina. Doreen, if you could just turn your camera on, happy to highlight you in the screen. But my last question, earlier, Doreen, you talked about the challenges, then you talked about kind of the programs and policies that can meet those challenges. And the final question I want to pose to you is, how can the international community really support those best practices, right? What is the role of, donors around the world, of INGOs, how can we really counter the impacts of TFGBV or other phenomena that really restrict women peace builders and women human rights defenders who are telling their stories on SDG 16 online around the world? So I welcome your thoughts to that question.
Thanks, Nick. My thoughts for this might be a bit controversial, in the sense that I already spoke about what needs to be done. I think there is nothing specific the international community needs to do, but rather use their power and their privilege to allow these environments to push for those things, right? We know what needs to be done in our communities, whether it's more training, more funds, more space, more accountability. That's what we want. What we will need from donors, so INGOs, i.e., people who have the power to push for these things, is to support us to push for those things. For me, it's that simple. I know that I'm kind of diluting it to something very basic, but that's what we've noticed, especially in the current context where there's a huge funding gap in the global south. There is a huge gap in terms of opportunities to talk about these things. And because of funding gaps and resource gaps, these things like, when I say these things, I'm talking about issues with gender, tools like storytelling get deprioritized. So what we need is these things to be reprioritized as well as to be consistent, right? And one more thing I would say in terms of what international communities or again, people with power and privilege can do, especially in terms of storytelling, is I've often noticed, you might have seen it too, with regards to what's going on all around the world, including in Nepal. Whenever there is a crisis situation happening, whether it's war, genocide, or violence against women, we see that the international community or international media, anybody, talking about it, right? When it comes to storytelling and when you're working with marginalized communities and with restricted environments, we need to shift away from talking about an issue and talking to people. So including them in the stories that we tell and allowing them to have that space is the most important thing international community can do. I think to make it very simple, the best thing that you can do in any way that you interpret it is to make space online, make space offline, so that we can talk about the solutions, that we can talk about the issues that we have. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jarini, and not a controversial answer at all, in my opinion. And I thank you for your straightforwardness. So we're now going to go into kind of a lightning round of last questions for our panelists, where we're going to ask the same question to all of them and get some overarching lessons. So I'm going to stop and turn it over to my colleague Jayatsna, I believe. Yes.
Thank you so much, Nick. And thank you all the panelists for your amazing responses. Now I have some questions, but feel free to answer both, or you can weigh them which one you want to answer. So my questions to all the panelists is, how do funding restrictions impact your storytelling work? What challenges have you encountered, and are there any creative or innovative workarounds you can share? So this question is to any of you who wants to answer. You can raise your hand. Okay, I see Irina. Yes, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, this is something that I already mentioned in my speech and answers the issue that, like, of course, we lost a lot of finance in our region in Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia due to all this limitation from USA. But I mean, it's not only the issue for us. Of course, it's also limit our storytelling capacities. Again, as I told, for example, in our case, we created this report for journalists or communicators to actually use, because it combines some stories from people, from voices, vulnerable voices that should be visible. But again, there are some other issues, for example, that should be reported right now, or maybe still it is on our shoulders to do it and to engage journalists, etc. And of course, I see that lack of finance is also it's also part of our like less capacity to be innovative, because we have something in mind. For example, we also wanted to work with alternative data or to do SDG indexes, and also in Belarusian case we have Belarusian Helsinki committee who actually has human rights index, and this is also something innovative that we can use, but unfortunately due to all these finding limitations we cannot be I will say creative again, but at the same time, as I told, these shadowing opportunities and also this alternative report, it's not only part of SDGs framework. I think and hope that it will be in climate justice as well, in NDCs, for example, when countries do national determined contributions but forget about vulnerable voices implemented. But again, it is about also creativity to find this alternative and shadowing way. This is we are good in, but we also need more capacity and resources to do it.
It's amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's very, very important to build more capacity and resource. That's something that we are also struggling, especially in the global south, as Tharini has also spoken. So I wanted to know if any other panelist was interested to respond to this question.
Just so
Yes,
okay,
Arjun.
just so I think in Nepal after this the USA collapse, like many problem of grassroots organizations, those engaging with the community voices, and the alternative now I think we can of course we can uh, social media platform and independent sometimes civil society activists, sometimes like the civilians also to collect the story and their issue and their agenda. And I think the best way utilize the digital opportunity. And second, I think we need to look the resources for different foundations or like even the Civicus Forus and Tap Network, like different organizations supporting different way to like generating small money. So maybe we can give some idea of the crowdfunding and other to support storytelling and related SDG and other of course. And final, I think the importance of storytelling, it's very the generating evidence and up to creating like space for the people's those in in the countryside or rural communities. So maybe we can extend peer learning, sharing, and sometimes the resource sharing from the different organizations across the globe. I think we need to create a different platform or a dialogue space and share knowledge and of course the resources like sometime for the storytelling. I think that is some ideas in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arjun. That's very important. Creating share language, share space to share our experiences back home. Yes. Thank you so much. Um, is there any panelists interested in this answering this question? Yes, Pravesh, over to you.
I just want to add some few point with the Arjun Dai. So Arjun Dai has already said so many things on this regard on this. So I just want to make this here. We need to decentralize the ideas of the storytelling now, because we all are focused on the globalized. We all are focused on the same things in the centralized one. So now is the time to decentralize the storytelling also now. Now it's the time to make more ideas from the grassroots level. There are so many traditional ideas, so many indigenous art and so many things which is very beautifully designed by so many peoples in previous time. So now it's the time to bring those ideas, those skills from the grassroots level and make them to grassroots to global. Now it's a time to G2G from next level, not the global to grassroots level. Now it's a time to make the grassroots level to global. So let's try for this. So bring some new ideas from the local level.
Thank you so much, Pravesh. This is something that we're also talking about, bottom-up approach and we already have a lot of wisdom at the grassroots level. Why don't we leverage on those experiences? Thank you so much for this. And my next and the last question we have not heard from Dharini is about what does resilience looks like for the civil society in restrictive environment, especially how can the storytelling play a role in sustaining that resilience? Um, Dharini, would you want to respond to this question or anybody else?
Sure. Let me
Sure.
just
Thank you so much.
I'll keep it brief. I think when we talk about resilience, especially in contexts where there's a lot happening, there's war or there's uprisings, whatever it is, we expect resilience to be loud. We expect resilience to be bold, but it doesn't always have to be that way. So especially in the context of storytelling, like I said before, it doesn't have to be something that necessarily goes viral, right? It has to be something that resonates with people. So it's important that when we are trying to be resilient in these environments where our space for democracy is shrinking every day, what we need to continue to do is not just fight, not just survive, but to continue to think, to continue to create whatever that is, and to continue to imagine. Because what most fascist and authoritarian regimes, governments want is for you to stop thinking, for you to stop talking, for you to stop communicating. And that's why whenever there is conflict, whenever there is, oppression, you notice that it's the schools, libraries, universities, and now in this modern age, social media that gets restrictive and get controlled first because they want to control how we communicate. They want to control our thoughts, our perspectives, the information that we receive, and the information that we give out and share with others. So in that sense, for me, resilience from a storytelling perspective very much looks like continuing to imagine and to create and to talk. And that doesn't always have to be loud or bold. Yeah.
Very well said, Dharini. Just shutting down all the source of knowledge and information, the biggest way of repressing the society. Thank you so much. Now I may want to move to the next session and to Elena to go for the open question round session. Thank you so much, Elena. Over to you.
Thank you, Jayatsana. And thanks to all of our panelists, and thanks to all of you for posing some really insightful and interesting questions in the chat. So what I've done is I've kind of taken questions that were asked in the chat. Some of you made some kind of observations as well that I've sort of spun into questions as well, because I think they're quite interesting. I have at this point, it seems like at least 1 to 2 questions for each of our panelists. So we'll hear, I think, from each of our panelists. The first question I had was for Irina. This was a question from Kamran Mamdovi. How can academia and university level organizing around the SDG16 framework offer peace and justice in countries facing autocracy and democratic backsliding? And maybe what can Georgian protest movements learn from Belarusian movements? Maybe doing something different or et cetera. I think an interesting question about like this cross border or cross kind of sector, even sort of learning, et cetera. So over to you, Irina.
I definitely cannot answer for the question what can be learned from us, because I already kind of like really inspired by Georgians, and you tried to do on the other way as Belarusians did. Yeah, and I really hope that situations will change. Yeah, because yeah, it's so complicated to live in exile, and I don't want to feel these things for anybody anybody else, as we do actually right now. But I know how to answer for academia and university level organization, what they can do. I wanted to tell you that in SDG framework, there are different constituency. I mean, in our region, we have ECRCM, and they are kind of advocate for us in UN also, but also in regional organization. But there is also constituency about science, where you can actually participate. And I know that people from our region, Eastern Europe, Caucasus, Central Asia, and Georgia is part of Caucasus. So this is opportunity for you, if you represent academia, to participate in it. And I mean, if you want to if you understand, if you want to understand what I'm talking about, you can also contact me. I'm very happy to share what how it looks like and how you can participate in these frameworks. And of course, with this, and again with alternative and shadowing things and or advocacy measures within UN or regional bodies, you can be part of this human rights agenda. I think that this is something that is missing for us, but there are a lot of opportunities still be done. And again, yeah, like I'm sorry for Georgians who need to live and feel the same things that Belarusians are now dealing, but I really hope that you will learn faster than we are, use our tactics, practices on international level, and hope that once your disaster will be solved.
Thank you, Irina. I have another question, or I have two questions at this point for Arjun and Prabesh. So I'll pose both questions, and then perhaps one of you can pick up one question and one of you can pick up the other, or both of you can answer both, however you want to tackle this. There's one question from Asli Telly in the chat. Do you see a similarity among Gen Z protests around the world and in your countries as significant steps towards peace building efforts, and what could be done to support these movements? And then another question from Frederick Shalom: how can we overcome, and this was maybe my interpretation of a question based on your comment in the chat, Frederick, but how can we overcome this increased competition, in particular for funding, to work together and cooperating in either programmatic work or co-creating collective narratives using the power of storytelling? So I don't know if Arjun or Prabesh would like to come in first.
Okay, so I'll start with and then Travis will continue on. I think the first questions of
Sorry,
course
Arjun,
that
can you just move a little closer to the microphone? It's a little hard to hear you.
okay.
Thank
Now
you.
it's okay.
Definitely
Yeah.
better. Thanks.
So questions related whether similar about and other into work coming they many old forces this government not clearly represent the Gen Z. It represents the more NGO and INGO. They are blending more NGO community. So and instead of leadership building, I think it's not time and co-creation and of course the knowledge sharing very important. So now we have to look. This is a very different scenario that previously we were engaging different types of conflict, but this is a really new types of this conflict and new stories, new agenda, and somehow it's very difficult to understand the new scenario and human management in Nepal. So I cannot say which are the similar in the situation or which are the not similar differences in our country. So of course, the Gen Z is a global one age group. Of course, there's similar agenda, and there are many corruption and the big agenda or this the power capture or funds delivery effectiveness. So those are the common agenda of all agency across the globe. Okay, but there's this the movement they start in Nepal and India. It's very different than other countries. That's my thing. So and taking our this whole this process of farming government and other is different than other countries. That's my quick observation. Maybe my colleagues will share more.
Thanks, Arjun. I know folks were maybe having a hard time hearing Arjun, but I will say the captions were remarkably capturing everything. So I recommend folks take a look at the captions. But maybe Prabesh, over to you on those
Thank
two
you. Thank
questions.
you, Elena. Are you hearing?
Yes, can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so talking about the scenario of changing movement, so what we have seen here in Nepal is the same, because it's all about the against the corruption. It's all about the system, because which system has a faults. It's all about the inequality and all about the unemployment, a lack of accountability towards the government and towards the people. So it's all about the system which is not sustained and which is not as a what they had committed before the election and all the systematic processes. So to talking about this, and if we are talking about the making a peace, and it is only the one solution that how to resolve all these things like the social justice and all the good governance sectors, social justice and the inclusion, and all these things have to be now addressed by the government is only one alternative ideas to making a sustainable peace. So you can see there is the same kind of movement in Sri Lanka, in Kenya, in Indonesia, in Bangladesh. So all are doing by the young people because they are frustrated with the government, because government is failed to fulfill all the things what they have committed before. So these are same. So how we can now resolve and making a peace process now is the important is all the dialogues should be centered to the young peoples and what we are talking about the YPS, and now is the time to really implementing the YPS in the local level, now bringing the young people to the peace talk, bringing to the people all the peace education and promoting all these things in the community level. Now it's a time of a meaningful dialogue between the civil society, between the academic institution, between the young peoples, and between the policy makers. And it's a time to train also, not only the dialogue, it's all about the training to those people also who are in the stakeholder, who are the peacemakers, who are the policy makers. So it's the time to train also them about the peaceful advocacy and the conflict transformation, how we can bring all those stakeholder, multi-stakeholder in the same platform to bring them to do dialogue and bring a resolution together. So also we need some good alliance from the international donors, agencies, and all the human rights defenders. Now it's the time to bring together all of them and in a one space and now talking about these issues seriously. So this is the things we have to now to taking it as a serious issue. It's not a only a movement, because it's a time to make a change and and it's a time to bring a sustained peace from this conflict. Now it's a time to think seriously and come all the communities together, and now we expect that from all those people who are working in the peace building.
Thank you, Pravesh. I think across both what you've shared and Arjun shared as well highlights the importance that this is a global sort of effort, a global initiative, that we need to be having dialogue across civil society and philanthropy. And even when we're talking about civil society, we're talking about all of the various levels of civil society, thinking about the role that civil society networks have to play in being able to kind of facilitate some of this dialogue. How can networks sort of play a role in addressing some of the funding challenges as well, whether that is through absorbing some of the risk that, donors are concerned about when they, are granting to smaller organizations, those sorts of things. So a lot to really reflect on and think about. And I think across all of that, the stories of colleagues is really central to unpacking the nuance and details there. So for Darini, I'm going to kind of borrow from two separate questions. So one question from Peter Van Slice and another question from Asli Telly. And so this question is a hybrid of the two questions that both of you have asked, but Darini, you spoke about the role of storytelling and the need for this to be used beyond just reporting. So how and where do you see these opportunities for practitioners to connect around storytelling? How can they develop a community practice on using storytelling in advocacy? And how have the community stewards training kind of helped with some of that grassroots action and local empowerment?
First of all, thank you to whoever brought up the community stewards training. That's years of work, and I could talk about it for hours. But anyway, I think in terms of using storytelling as a tool and not just as a reporting mechanism, the most important strategy that we can use, the most effective strategy that we can use, is to use cross-sector connections. Because where we fail, at least from my context, where we fail is we continuously try to rely only on storytellers to tell these stories. And that begs the question, who do we define as a storyteller? Who is a storyteller, right? Is it a person with a platform, or is it a person with a story? Is it a person with skills? Is it a person who's artsy, creative? And that reduces us and limits us to the impact that we can have. So I think what we really need in regards to this is cross-sector collaboration. So that includes people who are in the creative space, right? Whether it's an artist, graphic designer, singer, actor, whatever, you need the activists. And then you also need researchers to bring data. You need journalists. You need your donors, right? So it's about bringing these people together. So if you are building a COP, a community of practice, make sure that it's not just storytellers, it's not just influencers, it's not just creatives, or not just donors, right? Because they can all contribute. I can give you one example from the context of Sri Lanka. When we had our Gen Z protests, not Gen Z necessarily, but our protests in 2022 called the Aragalaya, I was added to a WhatsApp group out of nowhere. And they said, hey, we are providing some information on how to stay safe during protests. Can anybody translate this from Sinhala to Tamil? And there were like hundreds of people in that group. And I volunteered for the Tamil to English translation, and somebody else volunteered immediately. And somebody said, hey, can I just do this on Canva and make like a leaflet that'd be easier to pass around? So it's about that. It's bringing different people together who have different skills. And someone else said, you might probably want to add the ambulance number here, safety number here, the self-care mental health number here. So people from different contexts bring different value into this conversation. So when building a community of practice, it's crucial that we include all of them as much as possible, right? As much as it's feasible. So that's number one. And in terms of the digital community stewards, it's been incredible to see how much impact it has had. Nick, make sure to tell Lena that we had a shout out about this, because we were able to adapt it to different countries as well as different topics. The Digital Community Stewards program started as a global program for building online social cohesion, but then seeing the impact that it had in Africa, in Asia, and in the Arab countries, we noticed that it can be adapted to specific countries. So we did a project through Search for Common Ground last year, which focused on Pakistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. And we used the digital community stewards specifically to tackle tech-facilitated GBV. And we also had talks at the time to use digital community stewards to use to tackle faith-based violence. So it's a tool or a strategy or an approach that you can use for any context, for any kind of topic because these digital community stewards, who are basically online moderators of WhatsApp groups, of Facebook groups, of Zoom spaces, have a lot of power and have a lot of responsibility. So the program is really about helping them and supporting them to use it properly. So yeah.
Thanks, Darini. Really specific and concrete there, which I think we all really appreciate, right? It's great to talk about storytelling in theory, but also talk about some of the practicalities. And so with that, the last question I have is actually a kind of open one, from Sarah to Kath in the chat. She said, as a journalist, I'm facing the following dilemma. In restricted environments, for example, in a situation of an oppressive government, I find it very hard to find civilians that dare to talk, even off the record. And activists that would be available to talk are absolutely overrun by international journalists and just tired. Any tips on how to handle this better? I think a really, maybe nice concrete question to round us off here. So would any of our speakers like to jump in on that one? Yeah, Darini?
Thank you. And if I may use your same technique, Alina, and combine it with a different question, because I saw somebody asked, how do you use storytelling in the context of domestic violence and health sector? And I thought that was so wonderful. Very quickly, I will share a resource in the chat as well. There is an approach that we use called trauma-informed storytelling. Trauma-informed storytelling identifies three important people when it comes to storytelling. There is the storyteller, the story owner, and the story receiver. And the way you protect them, all these three people, is very, very different. So in terms of the story owner is the person who the story belongs to, or the story happened to, the experience happened to. They do not necessarily have to be the storyteller, right? Because they're already in a position of vulnerability. So making sure consent, privacy, and safety for those people is the most important. In terms of the storyteller is the person that says the story. And it doesn't have to be a person. It could be AI. I'm not a big fan, but it could be AI. It could be graphics. It could be voiceless. It could also be collective authorship where a group of people say it so that one person isn't targeted. It could also be people of power. So in the context of domestic violence, we had a series where we asked men to tell the stories of women. So it was the story of a woman said from the voice and with the face of a man. So the backlash, surprisingly, was significantly lower. So allow people with power and privilege to say the story, to use their platform and to use their privilege. So that's why you see a lot of celebrities reading out stories of people who can't talk for themselves. And then finally, the story receiver. Make sure that the person who receives the story isn't traumatized or re-traumatized by reading the story or accessing the story. Providing support, hotlines, numbers is important. One specific trick that I learned is sometimes when you're in the context of GBV, you can't watch a video with audio because people will know what you're listening to. That's why having captions in your video is useful. So even if somebody can't listen to the story, they can read the story in the video and still know what you're trying to say. That's just something I wanted to add. And very quickly, about being a journalist and not being able to get testimonies or stories. The first thing I will tell you is that people don't owe us their stories. They don't owe us anything, let alone their stories and their trauma and their experiences. So we need to make peace with that, first of all. And if we do want to share those stories and give them a platform, the first thing we need is to build a relationship with them. So it's not about getting what happened. It's about knowing who they are. The more they trust us, the more they know who you are and what you're going to do with the story, the more likely they are to share it with you. And I've noticed a lot of people say, I can't talk to the activists. I can't talk to these big people who can tell me what's happening. It's not always talking to the activists or the big people, right? Talk to the people who can still tell you what's happening, but who are not like at the forefront, right? For example, if you're talking about GBV or domestic violence, you don't necessarily need to talk to an activist. You can talk to doctors, you can talk to nurses, you can talk to local community leaders, right? So remember that resilience can be quiet. So talk to or try to talk to people who are experiencing it but have never been given a platform before. So that's also helpful. So yeah.
Thank you, Darini. We have maybe one final minute if anyone else wanted to jump into that last question before I turn it over to my colleague Elise. All right. Yeah, I think Darini, you offered a pretty comprehensive answer for all of us. So thank you. And thanks for sharing this trauma-informed storytelling resource as well. Really, again, embodying the hope that these webinars will be quite practical, where we are, building skills and sharing findings and work across storytelling. So I'll pass it over to my colleague Elise to wrap us up.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you everyone for this very insightful conversation and for all the questions asked to our speakers and all their answers to the questions also from all the participants. I think this has been a very engaging conversation and with many people attending from across the world. So we're very happy to have had you spend the past an hour and a half with us. We heard from many different contexts and means of restrictions, and through this also looking and deep diving more into the value of storytelling and also through its different forms and shapes and using it as a tool to share our stories, our efforts in the work that we do. I will not touch upon everything that has been said. I think also it's been wonderfully also spoken about already from all our speakers. So I just want to thank everyone for all your participation and taking part of this initiative, as the aim of this initiative is also to provide a platform to amplify the work and the voice of civil society organizations through the stories to demonstrate their leadership role in driving progress towards SDG 16 plus. And by strengthening the ability to tell one's own story on the value of the work and share these across networks, we hope to amplify the messages within and beyond the SDG 16 community and across the sectors and the field to enable and support this environment to change for more funding, resources, and political will to the implementation of SDG 16 plus. And through this initiative, also we share the opportunity to share your story within its own form and we hope to collect a variety of stories from society organizations working on SDG 16 plus. And this is where we seek your collaboration and also your participation working in this domain to share your knowledge, your expertise, your stories, to showcase your learnings, your leadership, etc., and driving progress towards SDG 16 plus. So we'll put, I think, yeah, Elena just put in the link to what takes you to a Google form to submit your story. And you can also see on each of our websites also as well for more information about the initiative and also how to share your story. And the end product will be then to compile all the different stories into a written compendium, which will then be launched in the margins of the World Social Summit at the end of the year, in which you can also find more information on our website. So there's still an opportunity to submit your stories. So we hope to hear from you, and we look forward to hearing also your stories. So yes, with that, I would like to thank you all. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you for all our speakers, Darini, Irena, and Prabesh and Arjun for being with us and answering all the questions. And thank you for my colleagues and partners also for facilitating this meeting.